So, welcome everybody to the eighth edition of Leadership in the Trenches. And today I am so happy to be with these two amazing leaders. I've worked with both of them for a number of years now in many different capacities. Please welcome Kevin Hooiveld and Cherie Hooiveld. Kevin is the visionary for Tractional, which is a fractional organization that helps companies of all sizes find fractional employees. And Cherie is the integrator, which means Cherie gets things done. Right, Kevin?
You got it.
So we'll talk a little bit about Tractional in a second, but I just wanted to thank you both for making time. And this is a really unique uh, webinar for me because you guys come from the corporate world where you've both worked for companies with thousands of employees, but you've also worked with small business, and now you both have a small business that you're building from the ground up. So that's really unique perspective.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
excellent.
It's been interesting. It's been an evolution for sure to, climb the ladder up to the top and then climb the ladder back down to the bottom again.
Well, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
So tell me a little bit about Tractional.
sure.
Sherry, how would you describe that for the people viewing?
So Tractional is, it came out of a need, I think, that Kevin actually identified in the market of organizations, small, medium-sized businesses that required the knowledge of higher level executives, but didn't necessarily have the budget for higher level executives on a full-time basis, and not just in the integrator, which we call it, or the COO role, or even in the CFO role or chief financial officer role, but also in things like marketing, sales, HR. There's a big need for that, but not necessarily on a full-time basis. So Tractional was formed to help those small and medium-sized businesses find those executives on a fractional basis, which we always get the question, what does fractional even mean? Which means they don't go in there full-time. They'll go in there 1 day a week, 2 days a week, half a day a week, if that's all that a company can afford to get a few things done, in order to help at that higher level without having the full-time cost or commitment of an employee. So we act as a matchmaker. Basically, we have a bunch of fractionals on our roster now that we kind of match up with various organizations and businesses that need those different levels of services. And Tractional comes in and helps find those fits to help them out. I don't know if you
That's
want to add
excellent.
anything to that, Kev.
Yeah, so I think the key differentiator between us and a consultant is we are not consultants. We don't come in and prescribe how to do things and then leave the work to the companies. We actually come in and do the doing. So we're actively involved as part of that company, simply on a part-time basis.
Okay. So along that lines, let's talk about how that applies to leadership. So Cherie is an integrator. So Cherie comes into my organization as my fractional COO. That's a high level leadership position. How are you finding that the leadership team of the organization you're working with, but plus the layers below are reacting to that leadership that you're bringing in? Cherie, how do you feel about that as a fractional COO
Yep.
integrator level?
I'm more new to it than Kevin is. I came from a CFO role in a large organization. Kevin came from the operations side. I've just recently moved into the operations side, so I don't have as much experience to give you on that question. Kevin probably would, but in my experience, they're receptive. I think they usually recognize, at least the top leadership team normally recognizes that they need some kind of help and guidance. They need somebody to come in to really hold people accountable and get things done. You're always going to find those teams where there is opposition.
Hmm.
Hopefully we do the job well and get them on board quickly. And we work with a lot of companies that run on EOS, and the EOS structure in itself, you know, makes it so that you fall into that position a little easier because the accountability chart and the tools that EOS provides, forces that to happen. You have to have the hard conversations. You have to say the thing. So Kevin, I don't know if you want to say more from your experience. You've been in several. Kevin's been doing this now for 4 years, 5 years. I've
Yeah,
lost count.
fifth year
Um,
coming up here. Yeah. Yeah, it can be challenging, especially when most of our work is done remotely. So we do it over Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. It's a little bit harder to build those personal bonds and that trust level up front. But once you do, it falls into place pretty quick. Typically, these companies are coming to us because of some pain. They've got some pain in their organization. It could be wrong people in the wrong seats and they just don't know how to or don't want to have those hard conversations. That's where we come in. It could be they're scaling quicker than they know what to do with, and they've got, tons of revenue, tons of profits, but all kinds of issues in the ops side. We can come in and fix that. Or maybe they're struggling and sales and revenue aren't there, and financially they're not doing well. We can come in and be diagnostic and help in that side too. So typically, an extra set of hands, another smart person in the room is appreciated. We're usually welcomed pretty quickly into the team.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I think an unbiased outsider coming in that can really give different perspective too helps.
Very important.
Yeah.
Unbiased perspective. That's excellent. So let's talk about the leadership teams you're working with. What are the challenges from a leadership perspective, Kevin, you're seeing from the teams you're working with? Are they struggling with multi-generational workforce? Are they
Yeah.
struggling with what's their biggest issues that you guys are seeing?
So for me, it's not typically not a lack of ideas. They usually have great visionary leaders that have lots of ideas. It's just the execution layer. And I always joke at a lot of companies, especially here in Niagara, we take our best electricians and we make them the foreman. I see that a ton. People that aren't trained to be leaders, people that maybe don't even want to be leaders, they're pushed into this leadership seat because of necessity. There's nobody else to do it. He's just the best guy, the best option at the time. And that's where things start to fall apart because they don't know any better. They don't know what they don't know. And it's not their fault that's failing. So we can come in and we can coach and mentor. We can give them the tools that they need to be successful. Or sometimes we help identify that they're not the right person and we recruit and hire and train somebody else, or pick somebody else from within the organization that maybe was overlooked. Um, I've seen that a bunch of times. You get folks that grow up in the business and they're always seen as that, 19-year-old kid, even though they're 39 now and they're super talented, but nobody sees them as that 39-year-old superstar. They see them as the 19-year-old kid. So
Right.
help identify that. It's that outside perspective that Cherie was talking about. That's really helpful.
So along that line, Sherry, of people being promoted from within. So Kevin was saying you take the best electrician, you make them the foreman. I'm sure you've witnessed that in not just with some of your clients, but
Yeah.
both of you in your past career. Um, One thing I've noticed now is Gen Z, um,
Mhm.
they're not interested in being leaders. And I think partly is because they see how stressed we are
Yeah.
as leaders. And they're like, I don't want any of that. Um, are you witnessing that? And if you are, have you done anything or seen something where it's helping those people embrace leadership?
I've definitely seen it in prior work experience. Um, Sometimes they have the desire to be a leader in terms of they know that there needs to be a leader. They just don't care to have the extra responsibility. They don't feel like the benefits outweigh the responsibilities. I guess, that's just gone through coaching and being supportive and knowing that they have somebody there and a team to answer questions. So, Larry, in my past, how we've met is we've brought you in to do some leadership training. We definitely had people in those sessions that didn't necessarily want to be leaders, but they recognized that they were kind of put in that position to be a leader. And then coming out of those trainings, realized that they had a group of people around them that they could lean on. And then that just, helped them to move into that role. I haven't really encountered, we've definitely had to go down the line sometimes when you think that's the person that's going to take over. And then you have a conversation with them and you realize they have no desire to do that. They're certainly comfortable where they are. And then you have to just go to plan B. But I think it's a different culture now of realizing that you need to lead these people as a team, that there needs to be a whole group of support around them so that they don't feel so isolated and alone. And if you do that, then they tend to be more open to taking on those leadership roles. And of course,
That,
they all want to be paid very well, that generation.
Yeah.
of course. But that word you use, isolated, that's a really big point. Uh, so Sherry, I know when I worked with you at your previous employment, um, you guys were big on uh, the sort of after a meeting, there would be discussions where people felt they were clear about what to do and they could go to somebody. They weren't just sort of, hey, by the way, here, we'll see you in a month. Do you find that's everywhere, or that's sorely lacking, or no, you think it's pretty prominent right now, that layers of support?
No, I think it's still very much lacking, even in the organization that was in, within the department that I ran, that was very much the case. You're right. That's just the way that I led, the way that I had my entire group lead. But you can certainly see different silos within the organization, even that didn't necessarily operate that way. And maybe because they didn't have the emotional intelligence or the training and leadership training, and they got promoted into that job and didn't really understand what the people around them need. So I definitely see that where I've come from. I think that's still a huge problem everywhere, that, especially with women. A lot of women that I talk to feel very, very isolated. They work with a lot of men sometimes, and they don't feel like they can ask those questions because it makes them look weak, or makes them, they can't lean on anybody else for support because it looks like they can't do the job. And so I see that a lot, unfortunately. And I think that the mentality needs to shift, to making sure that we're all kind of in this together, and that asking questions is a good thing. It makes us better as a team, makes us better as an organization when you have more minds looking at it, different perspectives, right? And that's what DEI is about. It's not necessarily about checking a box. It's about making sure you have all those perspectives in the room. Right?
Right.
That's going to make for a fantastic company and a fantastic answer.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
No,
I
I
think
go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say we're in such an incredibly unique time in our lives where we have these, four different generations of people in the workforce, and they're all so different.
Yeah.
You've got baby boomers with this incredible work ethic. You've got the Gen Xers like us that have this innovation need where we're pushing because of all of the innovation that we grew up with and the change. You've got the millennials and the alphas with all this tech fluency and AI knowledge that we just don't have. And for that all to come together in one point, one generation, one time in our lives, it's super cool and unique. And the companies that can harness that and actually understand that are going to be so much further ahead than everybody else. The ones that fight it and say, the boomers that come in and say, you got to be at your desk from 9 to 5, and that's the value of work ethic. Like the Zennials and Alphas, they just don't think that way. They think very differently. And if you can lead them appropriately, the results are incredible.
Yeah.
There's just so much knowledge in the room right now.
100%. I find that when you peel the onion back, it still gets back to the basics of trust and communication. If those two things are not taught, they're not trained. Everyone's making it up as they go. Everyone thinks they're a great communicator until they start communicating.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about that for a second. So you guys, like I said, you've worked with multiple organizations, and you're now working with companies of all shapes and sizes. How are you helping the companies you're working with develop new leaders, people that are in their first supervisory role, foreman role, manager role?
Mm-hmm. Cherie, you want to take that one?
um, yeah, I mean, I've just always done it through coaching, I guess, and understanding. I like to build trust as fast as I can on my team and with anybody that I'm trying to bring up. And then I kind of teach them in the same ways to just build that like around themselves, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of
Yeah, no,
a
that's good. I think for us, we're deeply involved in the EOS ecosystem, the entrepreneurial operating
yeah,
system, and it has a set of tools in there that we follow when we help lead and manage these companies. Things like one-on-one conversations. We do this weekly. It's a mandatory piece of our agenda. Scorecards. We develop and look at those weekly and give good feedback and positive reinforcement when things are going well, and have the hard conversations when they're not. And it's just that cadence. Habit building that sets that expectation and sets a positive learning environment for these younger workforce people. They're coming up, they're learning better habits than maybe
yeah.
some of the
And
generations
even if they
before.
don't run on EOS, Kev, like because we're so used to US companies, we still take some of those tools, I guess, and apply them into a company that does not run on EOS.
Sure.
In any way that we can, just maybe not with the same terminology, or obviously the programs that we use to keep track of all that stuff. But those types of principles that come from the EOS tools are applicable everywhere. A large business, I know I implemented
Yeah.
a lot of them into, the big business that I used to be in, and it is applicable right down to small startups. Those tools are just phenomenal, and whether you actually follow that EOS system, strictly and you implement it, which of course we encourage, you can still find a way to implement those tools, and they help all young leaders, I think, to really understand, the things that are going to make you successful and keep you organized and on track.
Yeah.
100%. I'm finding that new leaders are the word confidence is always a
Mhm.
challenge for them. And they're at least in the companies I'm working with, some of them are afraid about making mistakes. And what I try to impart to them is actually when you're learning something new, you should make mistakes. That should be encouraged to make mistakes. But if you're in a safe environment that mistakes are treated as learning instead of punishment, then away we go. Plus, if the people you're coaching or you're managing understand that you're a new leader and you're finding your way and you're sort of vulnerable or humble with them, most people are like, "Hey, I'll support that. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and work with you on this."
Yeah.
But a lot of times they're just like you said, Kevin. Hey, you're a great electrician. Why don't you go lead these 7 guys and I'll talk to you about it next year at your annual review and tell you how bad you did.
Right. Exactly what happens. Yeah.
Or they
100%.
lose half their workforce and can't figure out why.
Why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, Cherie. Why is turnover so high?
Yeah.
So, Cherie, I want to circle back to you. You mentioned women in leadership roles, and I know that's a passionate topic for you. You speak about it, you write about it. Um, I've been fortunate enough. So, I have 4 older sisters. So, I absolutely understand women in leadership roles, whether I wanted to or not. Uh, but I also work with a number of companies that are owned and led by women,
Amazing.
and I'm finding that. Um, they're not having a challenge when they're the owner. It's the levels down that I still find they're struggling. And again, I hope I'm not misinterpreting this, but this is what I see is like when she's the president, she's the president. I got to listen to her. She's the president. But when she's a manager or a supervisor, I'm still seeing some struggles there. What are you seeing, Cherie? And how are we able to, as business leaders, combat that and turn that around?
Yeah, I mean, we're still seeing it, right? I'd actually just had a conversation with a younger leader woman that I touch base with occasionally, that reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she was just even, dealing with a situation that morning. So yeah, it's definitely still an issue. I dealt with it as CFO of a large company. It hasn't gone away. I like to just always say that, the amount of negativity and the amount of issues that women have dealt with in the workplace, it appears sometimes that they have diminished. And so large companies or any organizations really like to say, well, we're doing better. I think that those people have just gone underground, is what I always like to say now. They know not to say it out loud to certain people. They certainly still say it, or they think it, or you can see it through emails and tone and,
Right.
just certain things that come out of their mouths. How we combat it is just through education, is all I keep saying. Education and zero tolerance is what I've always tried to enforce, at least amongst the teams that I have led. That, you know, treating women or anybody, honestly, um, in a way that you wouldn't treat, a fellow peer is not acceptable. Saying some of the things and calling them some of the things and implying some of the things, it's just not acceptable, and it needs to be shut down immediately. And I think that if the organization at the top, which is why I think when you're seeing women who own the business don't accept it, so then that automatically gets pushed down. If at the top they're accepting it, then everybody's going to accept it. At the top, it needs to be shown that that is not acceptable at all, and that everybody is embraced in the organization. So I think that's one way. And then educating, unconscious bias is a real thing. I've worked with a lot of fantastic men who still don't even realize that they have the unconscious bias until I point it out, and then they're horrified because they are very supportive and they are, they work with a lot of very intelligent and wonderful women and they love it. But they don't realize that there's still unconscious bias there. I catch people in it, all the time. And some people get very defensive about it until they think about it, I think, and realize, oh, yeah, you're right. Um, Even from things where we say the word guys all the time. You just always imply that it's men. So I think it's just education, and it's continuing to I can speak about this for hours, as you can understand here, Larry, but um, it's continuing to make sure that we catch people in those things, correct it, and understand that the behaviors are not accepted.
Absolutely. So let's talk about culture because
Mhm.
that's a segue into it. So
For
Kevin,
sure.
um, what kind of effect are you seeing the generations having on culture as far as a leadership role?
Hugely important. So I'm a passionate advocate of culture. Every company I've worked with, we install culture core values. We hire by them, fire by them, and the ones that are truly successful, are the ones that really do embrace it. They realize that culture isn't just about little perks. It's not even about the salary. It's trust. It's trust that, you're going to come to work every day and have a safe place to work where, like Cherie was saying, there's not going to be um, different levels of expectation for different folks. The expectation is the same. It's this culture core value that we've set and the same application across the board. Trust that their boss has got their back and wants the best for them. Trust that they're going to have a paycheck at the end of the week. Trust that there's going to be opportunities to grow. If you can build that foundation of trust, everything becomes so much easier, and it's not easy to do up front. Um, but once you do, everything becomes easier. You have the right people in the right seats all of a sudden, and everybody cares, and everybody thinks entrepreneurially, and everybody wants the best for everybody. And that's a really impactful thing. I know early in my coaching career, I had Vern Mallow as an early mentor of mine, and he sort of installed this really basic principle. It's like it's know, like, and trust. You got to know the people. The people need to know you. You need to like the people. People need to like you. You do those two things right, and you'll get trust. And trust is the absolute foundation of it all.
Okay.
I think
Uh,
communication out there, I just want to jump in. I know you talked at the beginning about communication too, and I think communication is a big part of it too, Kev, because when you're talking about different generations and how that impacts culture, I think it's very key to have those open and honest conversations and communicate because, the expectations of different generations are very, very different. Like Kevin pointed out earlier, the boomer generation there, have a massively hard work ethic. They expect people to be at their desk from 9 to 5. Like that is just how they came up. They saw it work, and so if you can communicate and get to a place of understanding between those generations and everybody's actually on the same page, it will make things a lot better because there is such a difference, I think, in um, the standards of work or even the expectations of work or your place in an organization amongst generations.
Yeah.
so Sherry, do you think young leaders realize the impact that they can have on culture?
Mhm.
I think young leaders do. I think actually it's the older generations that don't realize the impact they have on culture.
Mhm.
And I think I've said this before in a few different things that I've done, that it's not just that the young people have a lot to learn from the older generation. That is true, right? The young people come in and they have a lot to learn and they're eager to learn usually, and they have a lot of knowledge that just needs to be downloaded into them, especially in these owner-run companies. They need to absorb and learn. But I think where you find the success in that real golden moment is when the older generation can realize that they also can learn from the younger
Mhm.
generation, and that doesn't make them any less fantastic. It actually will make them even better, right? If they can embrace the fact that, yeah, they don't know the technology where this young person does. Let's ask that person their opinion because they may have a faster, more efficient way of doing this that can save me hours. And so if they stop looking at the younger generation of, all these young punks that come in and don't want to work hard, and they actually say, how can we work together? And then you can find this amazing, connection between the two generations where they thrive off of each other. And I've
Mhm.
seen it happen, as long as you can embrace it. But I've seen the opposite where, they're both very opposed, and
Hmm.
nothing gets done.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see. A lot of times the younger generation has a different viewpoint of what success looks like, right? The boomer generation success is having a big business with big revenue and big profits and a cottage and a race car and blah, 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 blah. The younger generation is very different. The purpose is very different. They're very much driven by something bigger and greater than that. It could be a better work-life balance. It could be seeing the world. It could be exploring a hobby at a much deeper level. And work is just sort of the thing that kind of exists on the peripheral. And if you can tie those two things together, it can be quite magical. I had a client a year or so ago that was in the tire business, not a super sexy business. And the owner was, early 50s, mid 50s, aware enough to realize that the purpose was not to make money. Money was not necessarily the value in which he judged his success. It was giving back to kids in third world countries. He would sponsor kids overseas. So we changed the purpose of the company around a little bit. So it's not about a revenue target or a profit target anymore. It's about how many kids can we sponsor in a year. It has a direct tie into profits. You can only do that if you're profitable.
Yeah.
Once we changed that, his workforce changed overnight. All of a sudden, people bought into this greater purpose. And it was like putting another picture on the wall and putting another picture on the wall and putting another picture on the wall. And it was a big thing. It was really exciting for them that, every $1 million we made, we can put 4 pictures on the wall or whatever that looked like. Super impactful. They started drawing in people from the community and people from outside the community to work there because they wanted to be part of that purpose. They believed in that mission. It wasn't about selling tire parts. That was just the byproduct of it. And the companies that can get that right are going to have just an incredible advantage of attracting that younger generation of talent because they're so purpose driven.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the questions I always ask a client when I first start working with them is, why do you exist beyond making money?
Exactly.
And it's so hard for a lot of them to answer because a lot
I
of them will
love
say,
that.
well,
That's all it's
why
about.
isn't making money it? I'm like,
Right.
okay, but you're not going to keep people around.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I also find, and this is for either one of you to comment on that generations, like you were saying, but I think they look at time differently,
Yeah.
how they use it and how much they appreciate it. And I think that's the difference that one of my clients has a couple of 20-year-old people working for them, and they like to work at night. And the owner is struggling with this. She's so, what are they doing? I said, well, let's not worry about what they're doing. Let's worry about what they're producing. And so we're trying to have conversations around that. And she's like, but they're not in the office that much, and okay, well, look what they're producing though. Like it's amazing stuff. And so she's trying to get around there. But I think if we can look at time a little differently, and embrace each other's opinions about time and
Mhm.
not view it as threatening or wrong,
Mhm.
then I think that could have a big effect on culture.
Yeah, I think you look
Um,
at everything that people like that tend to look at everything very cynically, right? Like very like glass half empty, I guess, in that if they're not in the office, they're not working, right?
Mhm.
And it's changing that mindset that that's not necessarily the case, right? And what do they value for their time and work-life balance, like Kevin mentioned, right? Like family dynamics have shifted over the years. It's not like it used to be. Lots of fathers stay home. Lots of fathers want to make sure that they have work-life balance. They don't want to just go to work the whole time and leave somebody else taking care of the kids, like it's, and vice versa. Like now women spend a lot more time in the workforce, right? it's
yeah,
it's a way different world now, when you're speaking of work-life balance and where you can be efficient in your time. You can put your kids to bed and then go and work, and you can do great work,
Yeah.
you know.
yeah,
No distractions. Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
agree. I think it's shifting between output and outcome.
Yeah.
In
Mm-hmm.
outputs, like I remember, I worked for an ad agency a million years ago, and my boss's whole thing was if you didn't work 65 hours a week, you were a lazy blank blank. Um, but now it's about what did you produce?
Mhm.
So you might have worked 65 hours, but all you produced was stress and high blood pressure.
Yeah.
That's not really creating anything.
Yeah.
So
That's
let
a shameless plug for Tractional. I mean, that's one of the key reasons that we created this fractional sort of environment. It allows us to go into companies on a part-time basis on our time more often than not. We can do a lot in 8 hours a week that if you were stuck in the office, you would have to take 24 hours to do because you're doing the coffee pot talks and the walk around the office and the hey, how's your weekends? The stuff's important, um, but it's not producing an outcome like you're saying.
Yeah. I used to say, like, in my corporate job, when I was at my desk, I didn't actually get to do the things I needed to do, my outcomes. Like the outputs that needed to come out didn't actually get done in my daytime at the office. They got done when I got home after dinner. And I sat back down on my computer to actually get stuff done because people are in your office constantly. You're dealing with the day to day. That when, as a fractional, you come in and you're not dealing with those day to day necessarily. You're going in and you're getting things done, which
Yeah,
is
right.
amazing. Such a satisfying feeling.
100%. So Kevin, back to the tractional world,
Yeah.
the fractional situation. So you guys come in, and one thing I've heard about EOS over the years, I have a number of clients that use it as well. It's a great tool, is the top level gets it, uses it, embraces it. Then when we go down to the second and third level, it starts to lose some connection. So not to focus on EOS, but how do we get the leaders here to understand that these other layers of leaders need encouragement, embracing, and not just leadership tools, but also how we do things and making them all connected. How are you finding you're able to connect all that together?
So I think that's the Achilles heel of most companies, that mid-manager level. Some companies have great management. They've hired from outside. They've got work years experience and knowledge. And you got the entry level staff. They're coming off the street, and we're training them appropriately because we've got good standards and processes, and we know how to train those. It's that middle layer that's really tough, because it's the electricians that we've promoted to be foremans. It's people that have been there a long time that maybe just because they're an aunt, and uncle, a brother, a cousin of somebody, they got that job once upon a time.
You know
And
all my clients, Kevin.
yeah, right. It's common. Um, so that's hard. And I think, it's eating the elephant one bite at a time. That's my secret sauce there. Is you have to talk to them in a way that they can understand. You have to give them the information in a way that they can digest it. So at the leadership team level, maybe we have really sophisticated scorecards and great P&L reviews, but the middle layer is not going to understand that. So we have to tweak the message. We have to sell it in such a way that they can understand it. And that might be, in some cases, some companies I worked at, it's screens throughout the warehouse. And we just turn lights red or green. Red is bad, green is good. They can understand that. And the context behind it is usually a lot deeper. There's math and science and all this stuff that happens, but it's as simple as a red light, green light. And for that middle level manager, that's where they need to start. We can hopefully over time increase that knowledge base and give them more tools and give them more knowledge, and they'll be better leaders. Also empowering them to bring forward their ideas. I mean, there's so many cultures where we don't want to hear ideas. We know everything. We don't want to bother with that. Having that level of open communication and trust where they can speak their minds and they can bring those ideas forward. That's where the magic happens, is in that middle layer. They know what's wrong. They're the ones suffering in silence most of the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that all the time too. Like nobody ever asks them, right?
Oh,
The middle layer, or I've seen it time and time again where people make the decisions that aren't actually doing the work.
right.
They think based on data and their analysis and all this stuff that makes sense on paper.
Yeah.
But then you put it in front of employees or a group of employees, or a group of middle management, and they're like, well, that's never going to work. We just heard it the other day, actually, with a friend of ours who came over for dinner asking for some help in an organization that she's in, that she's really struggling and what to do, and that's exactly it. They don't ask for input and ideas of what makes sense. Float the idea to them, let them give you feedback, let them be involved in it. And when they're involved in it, they tend to understand it. They want to adopt it. They encourage it.
Yeah.
But that's providing an environment of psychological safety that has to be
Okay.
built on trust first before they feel like they can bring those ideas and those criticisms forward when some
Yeah.
new idea is now coming out from the leadership team, that they think is not going to work.
Yeah.
100%. 100%. I call it the squished level
Yeah.
because they have top and the customers and they're just squished in the middle. And
Yeah.
I truly find it's the most difficult leadership position in any organization is middle management. It's
Totally.
you're just getting it from both sides all the time. A question I'd love to get both of your opinions on is what are the qualities you think a new leader should focus on, um, accentuating or just getting better at, or making sure that they're really honing that skill as a leader? Cherie, give me one or two that you really think a new leader should focus on.
Yeah, so I always like to encourage, caring for both the people and the results. Not just, like, as Kevin spoke to this earlier, about not just focusing on profits, but I think the way that the world is shifting, and we've spoken to this already, that you really need to invest in the people and getting to know the people and building the relationships with the people. So I would encourage all young leaders to do that as they come up. And then be curious. I always say that ask questions. Curiosity is going to be something that you should carry with you your entire life, even when you get to the top of where wanted to get. Always stay curious. Always continue to learn. Kevin and I still read books or listen to books, mostly because we have more time to listen than we do to read. But to constantly learn, we listen to podcasts. Larry, like we do all these things to continuously learn and grow. And I would encourage every young leader to make sure that they stay curious, ask questions.
Yeah.
My favorite quote of all time, Cherie, is when you're green, you're growing, when you're ripe, you're rot.
Love it.
I love
Love
that.
that.
I don't know who said it. Let's say I said it. So,
There you go.
but
Take credit.
I love
Not by
that
Larry
saying.
Anderson.
I love it.
I don't know where it came from, but I love that saying.
Yeah,
Kevin, what
it's true
about you?
though.
What do you think are the one or two really important skills a new leader should hone in on?
So emotional maturity is a big one to be able to take feedback and criticism and actually just, objectively listen, not get defensive, not be fearful that I'm going to fire you. I'm just telling you, what we can do to be better. And two, I love leaders that like run towards the problem rather than running around them all day. Really identify what the problem is, run towards a solution, be part of that solution rather than just, chirping from the background.
Mhm.
That to me that's a leader I'll promote all day, every day.
Okay, my last question I want to get your opinion on is succession. So that's
Uh,
a huge issue at every organization I'm dealing with. So it's people in their 60s and 70s are considering leaving. People in their 20s and 30s are sometimes not interested in leadership.
yep,
And then we have this sort of the burnt out middle at times,
yep.
30s and 40s and 50s that are just, I don't want to take on more. And pardon me, I look at every role sort of has technical, administrative, and people sides to it, right? And most of the people we're putting into leadership have technical skill, like you were saying, Kevin, about the top electrician, or good administrative skills that can get stuff done. We don't invest in the people side.
Yeah.
So with succession, what challenges are you seeing taking place that we need to correct or we need to make sure we're looking at to have a good transition from that senior leader to the new leader?
So I think leadership skill set is something that is missing. I'm always surprised that we don't teach that in high school and in college and university about how to be a good leader. I mean, everybody can use that tool in their life, but we don't teach it. And it's something that we just assume you're going to learn along the way. With the shifting generations we have right now, you have just this mass exodus of boomers and leadership leaving. You've got the Gen Xers, myself and Cherie are prime examples of this, that don't want to work for somebody else 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week anymore. Um, Not that we don't work that now, but at least we're doing it for ourselves and it's work that we love doing. And that younger generation just wants to work different. So it's very difficult to navigate that. I think the sooner we can educate or train younger leaders on leadership skills, that emotional maturity, how to have difficult conversations, even simple things like how to write good emails. I mean, that's such a lost art that the younger generations don't do. They communicate in 3 sentence bursts on Snapchat with emojis, and you can't run a business that way. But if you understand how that generation works and you give them the tools, whether that's AI tools or tech tools that can help them, there's Grammarly and all these other things out there that can help them write better. Give them the tools, train them on those tools. They'll learn that habit and be better leaders because of it. So it's on us, I think, as the elders of the workforce to help the younger generation learn how to be better leaders, learn how to uh, take the tools that they have available to them and apply them properly.
Yeah, and that comes down to planning. I think, I've seen it where a leadership team that is aging doesn't necessarily want to think about it now. Oh, I'm 15 years away from retirement. Okay, well, now's when you need to think about it, because the person that you think may want to take over may not be with you. Their priorities may shift. They may not want to do it. You have to start identifying all of those potentials and developing the skills now, so that in 15 years from now, they are ready and they will move their way up. Not just saying, oh, they'll continue to plug along and they'll do great work. And in 15 years, we'll just throw them into this leadership team and they will have had no leadership skills development throughout that time. I think that's where I've seen it lacking, is the lack of planning to develop those younger generations in those leadership skills, over time. Like, let's not just say, okay, we're going to train you for a year to be a great leader and then expect you to be a great leader. Like, it's things of experience and time and conversations that need to happen over years. So, right from the get-go, when people are bringing in newer employees and younger employees to their company, you know, plans there need to be in place of how we're going to develop these people. And
Yeah.
not everybody will end up being that superstar that goes into that maybe management role or that succession role. But that will help you identify those individuals, right? Not everybody is going to want that or is capable of that or anything like that. I remember I was stunned by one employee I worked with for years who was so great at his job, so great. But I'd offer it to him a few times to like, do more. You can get paid more. You can have more, responsibility and a different title. And he just didn't want it.
Yeah.
He's like, nope, I'm happy where I am. And I'm like, okay, then just keep doing the great job that you're doing, right? But you'd have to plan for that. And
Yeah.
I find that it doesn't happen.
Leadership is not for everybody.
No.
It's a lonely road at times too. But you're right, Cherie. It's about time. And I'm a big believer that leadership isn't attached to your title, it's attached to your actions. So technically, every person can be a leader. So you're right, Cherie. It's like, can I create an environment where I'm encouraging leadership behavior of all my people? So that way it's not like, okay, Joe's retiring next year. Now today you're going to learn how to be a leader. Instead, no, you've always been a leader. You're now just going to have a different title.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's such a good point.
Becomes an evolution, right? As opposed to, something you just now have to take on, which I've seen that happen. And I've seen some people thrive from it and some people still kind of flailing and not really knowing what to do. And you're right, it's very lonely. But if you can create that culture where it's maybe not so lonely would help. And it gets lonelier the closer you get to the top.
Sure.
I've always said that, once you get into those management roles, nobody's ever going to like the decisions that you make, right? You're always going to have somebody against
Yeah.
it. Doesn't matter how great you think that decision is. And then that becomes a very lonely place. So, you need to just make it an evolution of these leaders. And then when you do move them into those roles, hopefully they're not as lonely because they have a group of people around them that want to follow them.
Yeah.
Because they've been around their leadership skills for years and now they want to follow them. They want to do good work for them.
100%. And right now I have a client that has a few people in their early 60s that want to retire. And I speak to the owner. I said, "Do you have an idea of when they're thinking of retire?" "Oh, it's years away." "Okay." And then we talked, and how long do you think it would take to train someone to take on that person's role? "Oh, that's probably at least 2 years." "Okay." Then we talked to the person. "Yeah, I think I'm going to retire this fall." "Okay." So we're not talking to each other, and now we're 18 months behind.
Right.
And by the way, the owner's only thinking of the technical aspect that he has to train,
Yeah.
not the fact that there need to be people skills and leadership skills developed. So,
Yeah. And I think honestly, Larry, that's why I could step away from the role that I stepped away from fairly suddenly. I mean, I gave almost a year's notice, but it was not in my plan. My plan was to work until probably 60, 65 in that company. But my priorities shifted in life. Kevin's priorities shifted in life. We just wanted something different. We wanted to work for ourselves and have a little more flexibility. But I think that I led that way. And when I left, I felt comfortable in the team that I left behind, that they could take it and run, right? I encouraged them not to hire to replace me from outside, right? Like I had built that team and not just technical skills, I had built people skills. And that's proof, I think, right there, that if you do what we're talking about and make it an evolution, it's a much easier transition when it wasn't expected,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
good point.
I'm still fairly young, I like to think, even though Kevin called us elders.
We are.
I'm an elder.
We are outnumbered.
You guys are not elders. But that's a great point, Cherie. And yeah, it's leave it better than you found it, right? So it's a good
Yes.
philosophy to have. And working with you and your team, I agree you did that. You also had really good people that you brought in that were just smart and good and
Yep.
well
Took me
trained.
years to get to that team, and you have to make
Yep.
hard decisions,
Yep.
and sometimes you have to make timely decisions. Sometimes we have a hard time as managers really recognize. Sometimes we recognize that that's not the right person, but we have a hard time making the decision and actually saying and doing it,
Yeah.
right? Which it's tough. These are people's livelihoods, and if you can't find another place for them, but you have to build to that end goal of like, this is I need to have this kind of team, right? And I think that's what I did in my 20 years I was with that company. It took me a very long time to get to that team. Um, and that's what I say. Like, it's just, you have to just continue to make those hard decisions and know what you need out of your team based on everybody's personalities and having difference of perspectives. It's a lot, but it can be done.
So you
Yeah.
mentioned something interesting there about time, and I think that comes up a lot in the work that we do. The owners always think there's going to be tomorrow, there's always going to be next month, there's going to be next year. I'm going to retire in 5 years. And then, 4 years, 364 days later, they realize I've run out of time. And they don't realize how expensive time can be. So from our side, we come in for short bursts and very time limited sprints, but we can get a lot done and move them a lot further quicker. And I think that's an important thing for um, all the generations to realize is time is being looked at very differently. The younger generation views it very differently. They want to work at different times of the days. They want to work weekends instead of working Monday, Tuesdays. They want to work 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. and not
Yeah.
7 a.m. to 11 a.m. Time has become very fluid, and it doesn't mean it's worth any less. It just has to be measured differently.
Yeah. I call it perishable inventory.
Yeah.
When that hour's gone, it's gone. So
Yeah.
how did you
Yeah.
use it, right?
Yeah. And then when you're talking about succession planning and time and everything, Kevin, it just made me think about like, I'm a certified exit planner as well. Larry, I don't know. I took that kind of last year, which was so super interesting when you're talking about the succession planning and really about, even if you're not planning on retiring today and you're planning on retiring in 10 years, when I talked about planning, you really do need to think about that now to build the value in your company and that plan now so that if something were to happen and you suddenly had to exit the company, you're prepared, right? And exiting that company, what does that look like in all kinds of aspects?
Mm.
But I think that's where it's really essential that you have that plan right from the get-go, even though your retirement's way down the road, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you don't know how much time you actually have,
Yeah.
right?
I always look at the analogy of, when you sell your house, you paint the walls, you shampoo the carpets, you trim up the hedges, you make your house look amazing to sell it. It never looks amazing when you live in it. But why would you not want to have an amazing looking house when you live in it?
That's
It's
Yeah.
the same
exactly it.
business is. You get your business all cleaned up and ready to sell it, but why not do that today? Why not have an amazing business today that you love and with people that you love and without the stress and the headaches? You can do that today.
Yeah. Well, speaking of time, we're out of it.
All right.
So thank you both, Kevin and Cherie
Thank you.
Hooiveld. Thank you both so much for your time. And we'll end the session here. And you guys were just so valuable to have on this session. I appreciate it very much.
I'm so glad
Thanks
we
so
could
much,
join you.
Larry, for having
Yeah.
us.
Thanks, Larry.